All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So you might have heard, back in early 2025 about some pretty big discoveries inside the Great Pyramids. I think people were talking about vast cylinders and things like that. And, if you're tuning in, it's probably because you want to kind of get, you know, beyond just those headlines and really understand what's going on.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that some people might have thought this involved, LiDAR, but
No.
actually what we found was that the news reports that came out really focused on radar technology. So that's going to be the key difference that we unpack for you today.
Yeah, exactly right. Our goal today is to look at all those news reports that came out in March 2025 and see what they were claiming about these radar findings. What kind of tech were they using? How did the rest of the archaeological world respond? So we want to give you the clearest picture we can, separating what was reported from what the experts actually think. So let's just jump right in and see what these news outlets were saying.
Well, in March 2025, a whole bunch of international news outlets, you've got the Economic Times, the Daily Mail, all sorts of them. They were all reporting this discovery of these cylindrical or pillar-like shapes under the Giza pyramids. Specifically, they were saying near the base of the Khafre pyramid.
And these weren't exactly small features, right?
No, not at all. Almost all the reports said there were 8 of these vertical cylindrical wells. One report said 6, but most said 8. And they said they went down really deep, like 640 to 648 meters, that's over 2,100 feet deep. Some even gave the diameter, saying it was around 33 to 39 feet wide.
Wow, that's a huge scale, like over 2,000 feet deep. It really makes you think, how would you even use radar to penetrate that far into the ground? Would that even be possible? Is that something you'd typically expect in archaeology?
Yeah, it's pretty unusual. And it wasn't just these cylinders they were talking about either.
Oh, really? What else did they find?
Well, these reports were also saying that they found other things underground, along with the cylinders, like spiral pathways and these huge cube-shaped chambers. Some were even describing what looked like some kind of water system. It's almost like they were suggesting there's this whole massive underground complex down there.
So who was it that actually made these discoveries?
The articles all pointed to 2 researchers, Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde. And just to be clear, every one of these reports attributed the discovery to radar technology. They used terms like, synthetic aperture radar, or IR, and said they were combining satellite data with seismic activity. LiDAR wasn't part of the story at all.
Okay, so we've heard about the claims, but what about the science behind it? I mean, was there any peer-reviewed research in 2025 that backed any of this up?
This is where things get kind of interesting. Even though this news was everywhere, we couldn't actually find any peer-reviewed publications from 2025 that specifically talked about this discovery of these massive cylinders. Now, the same researchers did publish a paper in Remote Sensing back in October 2022 that talked about using radar to find hidden rooms and some thermal anomalies, but they didn't mention these big cylindrical structures at all.
So it sounds like most of these claims were coming from press releases and briefings then.
Yeah.
Not really any serious scientific papers.
Right. And, in archaeology, that peer review process is really important. It acts like a filter so that people don't get too excited about something before it's properly validated. Because without that, even if a theory sounds really cool, there's a risk of misleading people, both the public and even other archaeologists.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, how did the experts react to all these news reports?
Well, the reaction was strong. Most of the big names in archaeology were extremely skeptical. We're talking big names like Hussein Abdelbasir, Mamdouh Al-Damati, and Dr. Zahi Hawass. They all had some serious doubts. And their biggest problem was that there was no peer-reviewed publication to back up any of these claims, and there was no official word from any Egyptian authorities.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty big red flags.
Right, like Dr. Hawass came right out and said that the radar techniques being used were, quote, neither scientifically approved nor validated, unquote. And you gotta remember, Dr. Hawass has spent decades excavating and studying these pyramids, so when someone like that expresses doubt, people listen. And it wasn't just him. Other experts were calling the whole thing science fiction and saying it was completely baseless. Even people who specialize in radar, people like Professor Lawrence Conyers, were saying that radar probably wouldn't even be able to penetrate that deep into the ground. And he called this whole idea of a massive underground city a huge exaggeration.
So basically, the experts were all pretty much in agreement that something wasn't right here. Did any of the more specialized archaeology publications cover this story?
That's the thing. We actually couldn't find much coverage in any of the reputable archaeology journals or websites during that time. Like Archaeology Magazine, one of the biggest ones, their content lists from early 2025 don't mention this discovery at all. And that's kind of telling because it seems like it was mostly the general news outlets who were running with this story, the ones that tend to focus on the more sensational stuff. The fact that it wasn't really being discussed in the expert publications suggests that the archaeological community as a whole wasn't really taking it seriously.
Okay, so let's sum up what exactly these radar findings were claiming to have found.
Sure, so basically the report said that under the Khafre Pyramid they found 8, maybe 6, but probably 8, of these large vertical cylinders. And these cylinders were supposedly over 600 meters deep, and some reports even said they were 33 to 39 feet in diameter. And Malanga and Biondi even suggested that these cylinders might be helping to support the weight of the pyramid itself, which is a pretty wild idea.
Yeah, pretty wild. So for listeners out there, the main takeaway here is this. There were all these reports in 2025 about finding these vast cylinders under the pyramids, and they were saying they used radar to do it, not LiDAR. But the whole thing was met with a ton of skepticism from the experts in the field. And that's because there was no peer-reviewed evidence to support any of it, and a lot of the leading archaeologists were straight up saying that it just wasn't possible.
You know what I think is really fascinating about this whole thing is that even though this claim hasn't really been validated, the fact that people are still using these non-invasive technologies like radar to explore these pyramids shows just how much we want to understand the past.
Totally. I mean, who knows what other secrets might be hidden in those ancient structures? And who knows what kind of technology we might use in the future to uncover them, right?
Yeah.
I think it reminds us that we're always learning new things about history. What we think we know today could be completely different tomorrow. And it's important to always be thinking critically about the information we're getting, especially when it comes to something as exciting as archaeology. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.